Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session, Arizona State and Federal Investments in Early Childhood Education, Next Steps and Ways to Get Involved. We are glad that you're joining us today to learn more about early childhood advocacy and sort of where we're at in the early childhood field and how we've gotten to where we are today. So again, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Hi, good morning. I'm Barbie Prinster. I'm the program manager with the Arizona Early Childhood Education Association. We are a nonprofit, and our members are made up of licensed private, for-profit, and nonprofit licensed childcare centers. And if you would like to become a member of our organization, we would absolutely love that. We work with all of the state agencies and stakeholders throughout the state to help make decisions for your business.
Thank you, Barbie. And I'm Eric. I'm the Chief Executive of the Arizona Association for the Education of Young Children, which is one of our two state affiliates of any EYC. And part of our work is working to advance equity, racial, and social justice in early childhood and elevating early childhood educators. Most specifically and most recently, we've been focused on ensuring that we're using federal funds to support worthy wages for the complex and important work that early childhood educators do in the community. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram to stay up to date on recent updates from the federal and the state level and ways to get involved. So we often share opportunities to make your voice heard with your elected officials and your legislators and information about upcoming funding or investments in early childhood. So please stay connected with us. We are excited to provide this session as part of our longer series of early childhood advocacy workshops. We know that early childhood advocacy is a collaborative effort. Each of our voices are powerful by themselves individually, but when we use our voices together to share a consistent message around just how critical it is to invest significantly and sustainably in early childhood, we're powerful in a collective as a collaborative. This session is made possible thanks to funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation through Child Care Aware of America and NAEYC. If you're interested in learning more about connecting with your elected officials or becoming involved in early childhood advocacy, you can check out a few of our sessions at the Arizona Early Childhood Workforce Registry at azregistry.org. So Barbie, do you want to tell us the first few things we'll be doing together?
Sure. Our agenda, we're going to talk about the federal investments in early childhood. There's amazing things finally happening for our industry, and then review the recommendations that are related to advancing equity, worthy wages, and educator support. And then we're going to investigate the state context and progress. And then Eric's going to go through exploring some strategies to get involved as a champion for children.
So we were really excited to provide this session because we know how critical and important your voice is as an early childhood educator. Your voice matters, your vote matters as well, and we'll talk a little bit about how you can make your voice heard a little bit later in this session. But we really think it's important that as an early childhood field, part of our obligation to children, families, and each other is to stay up to date and informed as community members, as voters, to make sure that we understand what's happening at both the federal and the state level in terms of funding and support for early childhood, and building our own skills as advocates so that we can better share our stories and our experiences to ensure that we are advocating for more equitable, vibrant, and strong early care and education. The intent is to, of course, support Arizona's children, families, and educators because we all deserve to have desirable and quality early learning environments. So let's get started with talking about the most recent federal investments in early childhood education. As Barbie mentioned, I can't think of any other time in our entire history where we've had this much focus and support for early care and education. And that's due in part because of the voices of early childhood educators like you and me, who have been working diligently to make sure that our elected officials know just how important our work is and how crucial early childhood is to the infrastructure of both the American as a nation, Americans as a nation, as well as our state's infrastructure. People can't get to work or get to school unless they have quality, desirable childcare for their young children. So Barbie, do you want to take us through some of the exciting updates in terms of federal investments?
So what a year. In the past 15 months, Arizona has received a whopping 1.3 billion. Yes, that's a B with a billion dollars for early childhood and early education. The orange pie piece shows the CARES Act money, which Arizona received in March of 2020. The Consolidated Appropriations Act was received in December of 2020, which was 248 million. And then the American Rescue Plan, which was most recently signed by President Biden on March of 2021, 956 million. This is a huge investment, and it speaks to the messaging that is happening in Congress. This is now a bipartisan issue in Congress. They are finally realizing, after years and years and years of lobbying and talking about this, about how important early childhood education is to our infrastructure, to our economy, and to families and children. So this kind of breaks down the three groups of funding that we received. The most recent American Rescue Plan dollars, within that 956 million, 600 million is earmarked for stabilization grants, and then the other 356 million is part of the CCDF funds, which is funding that we get on a yearly basis since the Child Care Development Block Grant had been signed back into law about 6 or 7 years ago, I believe. This is just a significant increase in the amount that we normally would get. With the $88 million of the CARES Act money that were received in March of 2020, DES immediately started issuing providers a flat rate payment because attendance dropped. People stopped coming, and due to COVID, and it was just a really scary time. So in order to stabilize the industry and help maintain and preserve providers, you were receiving a flat payment that was based on your January 2020 rate, as based it on a full-time rate of everybody. Now that did not come out of, that was still using the CCDF dollars. The Office of Child Care allowed for a waiver to do that. So that was not part of the $88 million of the CARES Act funding. But in April, they started the enrichment center programs where essential workers were allowed to receive free childcare, healthcare workers, first responders, grocery store workers. And then we asked for childcare workers because you guys were doing the hard work. You were showing up, schools were closed, and childcare workers needed to be recognized for this too. So that we asked, and they said, yep, you're right. So we included them as well. So that cost us about $24 million to do that program from April until August. Then in August is the first round of the stabilization grants. The governor allocated about 47 million. We used almost 36 million, and there were 1,809 providers that were approved between public schools, which I'm not sure very many, they had to be open, so I'm not sure how many public schools were approved, but licensed childcare providers, DHS homes, DES certified homes, and military and tribal facilities as well. Then the other thing that he allocated was to increase paid absences from 2 to 5 per month. You were not currently seeing that, but I'm hoping that's going to change within the next couple of months. Right now, because you're getting a lump sum payment now based on your average billing for the year 2019. So those absences are being absorbed if you are not billing more than what your lump sum amount, but we're hoping to see those 5 paid absences on top of the lump sum, on top of your lump sum, come hopefully July 1st, fingers crossed. And then they left about $10 million in reserve, which actually came in handy because the governor allowed for the essential worker program, childcare relief program to continue. It's a little bit different just because it's based on utilization and not based on enrollment like it was when it was first announced in April.
Barbie, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So you had mentioned that the governor allocated these funds, but we know that the funds go through to the Department of Economic Security. So can you talk about how that process works? Like, why would the governor of our state need to allocate these funds?
These funds have to be appropriated by our legislature. And so when we received this money, the legislature was not in session. They had stopped because they had ceased meeting because of COVID. So when our legislative session began again this year in January, one of the first things that was done was there was a bill that was run to appropriate this funding, which was basically it's allowing DES to spend this money. And that was done. There was no arguments or anything about it. The governor signed it and it was great. So now with this new money that we're getting in, the 248 million, along with the 956 million, those dollars are in the same bucket. They have to be appropriated by our legislature. So what the governor has decided to do is to include it as a piece of his budget rather than having any legislator come up with some language around it, because we don't want any language tied to this money without going through, stakeholders and early childhood advocates and making sure that they're spending it. They're not putting really strict rules or language around it. We want to have enough flexibility. This money is going to last us between 2 to 3, almost 4 years. So we need to have the flexibility to be able to, change our course of spending if we need to. So right now, the legislature is working on the budget. It's a very tense time down there. There's other stuff going on. All of the stakeholders that I work with have done a really great job in talking to Republican leadership as well as the Dem leadership, both in the House and the Senate, and saying, hey, this is what we want to do. Here's our recommendations, and just let us do this work and include it in the budget rather than, trying to write legislation that would be really restrictive. So had some of this reserve money left. So that was able to start up again. Again, it's based on utilization. It's not based on enrollment, and that is still continuing. And right now, the end date is the end of June. However, I think we might be pushed out to maybe the middle of August, I'm guessing. One of the things that you're going to see in our recommendation is that we recommend that this program continues indefinitely for childcare workers. The reason being is that this is a huge benefit for a childcare worker. Especially, one child is expensive to take care of, and sometimes you only get 50% off of your tuition. So that would be a huge benefit, and that is in part of our ask. And then in May of 2021, we had about $9-ish or so million left over of this money. And so the governor announced the Child Care Workforce Retention and Recruitment Grant, which providers apply for. We don't know the dollar amount per child yet. It's going to be based on how many applications they receive. But the payment will be sent out to providers on June 24th. It's a one-time payment, and you have until the end of September to spend it. And this is to hire people. This is maybe to give your current staff bonuses. This is maybe to give your current staff a temporary wage increase if you'd like to do that with that. But we know that staffing is really difficult right now. Even just getting somebody to fill out an application, let alone show up for a job interview. So this is going to hopefully help with that. One thing I do want to mention, as well as the governor also did announce the end of the pandemic. I think it's called PUA for short. I'm not exactly sure. It's pandemic, and it's the extra $300 that you're getting if you're on unemployment insurance. Our unemployment is only $240 per week. So people were, getting this extra $300. So he announced the end of that in July. That will stop in July. And then if people get off the unemployment rolls and they are employed for either 10 to 12 weeks, they can submit their pay stubs, and they will get, if they're working full time, they'll get a $2,000 bonus. And if they're working part-time, they'll get a $1,000 bonus. And the caveat to that is that they're also going to be able to be eligible for 3 months worth of childcare if they make less than $25 an hour or less than $52,000 a year. So that will help. Also bring children into your center, and then help people to go back to work. And the asterisks here that are marked with CCDF funds and the CARES Act funding. One thing I do want to note here at the bottom, Quality First through First Things First has continued funding scholarships at the February 2020 billing level. And we're really appreciative to that. That has been super helpful to providers and to families, with continuity of care. And they're still doing that. And I do not have any information on them from them on how long that's going to continue, but we're very thankful for that. So when we talk about the $248 million from the Consolidated Appropriations Act, the Department of Economic Security is the home for the administrative home for the CCDBG funding. So that's where all of these dollars flow through. And they have to write a letter to the federal government and say, here's our plan. And they work hand in hand with the governor's office and with stakeholders, which is us, to make this plan. Now we give them our recommendations, and of course, between them and the governor's office, they come up with their own plan. But seeing their plan, I was super happy. They want to increase reimbursement rates statewide to the 50th percentile of the current market rate survey, which is 2018. Childcare for students enrolled in a nursing or teaching program waives the 20-hour work requirement. And actually, House Bill 2016 did this. This bill was signed into law this year. And so this is going to be really helpful for parents that want to go to school and get an education. And we're hoping that this is going to extend beyond the nursing and the teaching, even into early childhood. This was part of Governor Ducey's State of the State address this year, and this was really important for him to do this. Also reducing parent copays, and another child care stabilization grant program similar to the one that you saw last fall. And then there also is talk in there about expanding Quality First. As many of you may know, if you are in a specific region, I know Southeast Maricopa is one of them that has a huge wait list. We've had people on this wait list to get into Quality First, maybe 9, 10, 11 years now. So we need to get them off the wait list and into a quality program, or even there will be some funds available for you to use if you decide to go the accreditation route. This is a big deal. We need to expand quality slots in our state. I know it takes a long time to get everybody on board, but this is a big deal that we need to work on within the next 2 months, especially with the other initiatives coming down the pipeline, which will from Congress we'll talk about in a little bit. And then expanded tiered reimbursement. This was also a brainchild of the governor's office, which we really appreciate. Back in 2016, we passed a law for tiered reimbursement. There are some federal money that comes through that is called quality set aside funding, and they have to spend 33% of those quality set aside dollars on centers or homes that are at a quality rating, which is either a 3, 4, or 5-star rating through Quality First, or they are accredited. And then you get a bump in your reimbursement rate. 3 stars is 5%, 4 stars is 10%, and 5 stars is 20%. And if you're accredited, then you get 20%. Now, if you're a 5-star, let's say you're a 4-star and you're accredited, you're not getting both. You're getting one or the other, whichever is the highest. And then finally, we've been begging for this for years. There is no reason in the year 2021 that we should be doing any billing by hand when it comes to childcare, and that's what's still happening. There are some of you that are in the PDQ, which you can submit your billing electronically. I know it's cumbersome. I know you have to change your password every other week. I mean, it's just not user friendly. And so this would be a new childcare management software system where you would have a portal where you would log in and you would see all of the families and the children that you're serving, and when their approvals come in, when how long they're approved for. It'll be able for you to track attendance and do all of your billing and payment, and then and that will be your way to message case managers. The time that it's going to save you is going to be enormous, and the time it's going to save the child care administration is also going to be enormous. This is just a really great way to streamline all things from DES, and we're hoping that we can also integrate some pieces from licensing into this too, as they're working on their systems as well.
So what we're hearing, Barbie, is that there's sort of the investment from these federal funds really will be to directly impact early educators and early care education providers. Specifically, we want to use a lot of the funds for that, but it's also, it sounds like it's intended to create and build a new, much more equitable and streamlined early childhood field so that so that we can really spend our time improving the quality of our early learning environments, right? So
Yes,
it's sort of like these
exactly.
two
Yes,
types of investments. Thank you.
exactly. Yep. Now, onto the American Rescue Plan, the big bucks. So nationally, this was $39 billion for childcare, which is just an enormous amount of money. It is unbelievable and kind of surreal at the same time. I've been doing this a long time, as well as Eric, and we've never had any money before. And now we have money and we are just ecstatic. And we are ready to make really great changes that are sustainable and to ramp up this early childhood community and be able to do what we need to do to have wonderful outcomes for kids. So like I said before, Arizona received 956 million. 600 million is for stabilization grants. The other 356 is for the regular CCDF funding that we already use for just for our DES child care administration program, but it's a significant amount more money. So Eric and I are both part of the Arizona Early Childhood Alliance, better known as AZECA. If you've ever attended Early Childhood Day at the Capitol within the last couple of years, this is the organization that leads that and put that on. Eric and I are on that planning committee as well. But we divided, there's a group of us, I think there was probably about 30 people involved, and we broke into 4 different subgroups focused on equity and innovation. And our subgroups were childcare workforce supports and equity, parent supports and equity, closing systems gaps, and then investing in system innovations. And our groups were focused on utilizing this money on new and important things that are going to support each of these groups, supporting our workforce, supporting our parents, closing these systems gaps, and investing in system innovations, which would be like this new, DES billing system to get us up and running and keep us going. So we came up with a large, well, I don't want to say really large, but we were focused on immediate needs and short-term and then like long-term needs too, of things that we want to see that change that we want to see sustained.
And Barbie, one important thing to mention here too is that the people and the organizations that were represented in these planning groups represent the tens of thousands of early childhood educators that serve children in our state. So I think it's important that we recognize that these recommendations are coming from the voices and the experiences of early childhood educators, and are specifically focused on creating a new, more equitable system, because we know the system we're living in at this time oppresses our educators who are Black, Brown, and Indigenous, and children and families who are Black, Brown, and Indigenous. So the work that we did on these planning groups was really centering equity in all the decisions we made. So as Barbie shares the recommendations in just a moment, we hope you'll see that these are really representative of the interests and the strengths and the needs of the early care and education field at this time, the things that early childhood educators are saying they need to be successful in their work, as well as the sort of larger systems level pieces that need to be adjusted, broken down, and/or rebuilt in order to create a much more equitable, accessible system.
So I'm not going to go through it. These are pretty much our immediate needs, and these are, we feel like, the most important ones that now this recommendation, Kelly Murphy from Children's Action Alliance, who also is the administrative home for AZECA, is putting together the final grand product of this recommendation sheets. And this will go to the governor's office, and then it will also go to DES, and we will also use parts of it to influence legislators going on as well, and making sure that they're understanding what we're looking for and having conversations if they don't understand or need some support on things, but we need their support as well. So investing direct support for early childhood educators, stipends, bonuses, wage enhancements, child care provider grant program, just like the essential worker program that I was talking about. If we want to hire people and we want to hire quality staff that are well-trained and want to do the hard, complex work that we do every single day, we have to pay people better if we want them to stay. We want everybody to be able to decide, you know what, if I want to work for Head Start, I want to work for Head Start. I want to work for the public school system, or I want to work for a charter school, or I want to work for a child care center. But there should not be a wage discrepancy or their benefits between that for them to be able to make that decision. They should be able to work with a 3-year-old and be well compensated as well as, or if not more than, a public school teacher as well. Building an equitable system centered around worthy wages, benefits, and desirable work conditions, just like what we talked about. Job embedded professional development is going to be another one that we're going to really look at. And when we send people to training, we want them to be paid for training, and we want their training to mean something. From a higher ed perspective, what if we give people or link some of these trainings that we're doing to college credit? An apprenticeship program, working towards an early childhood certificate, giving them those opportunities. Not everybody wants to go to college, and we understand that. But if they're given the opportunity to do that for free and giving them the supports that they need to be successful while taking these classes, I think that we would be building a really great educators in our system, a really great workforce. And then increase access to quality early care and education across a variety of diverse contexts. So then continuing the Essential Worker Scholarship for eligible early childhood educators, that is probably one of our biggest asks. I don't know if we'll get it, but I think it's really important, and I will absolutely continue that conversation. Building an apprenticeship program. I know DES is interested in this. The governor supports apprenticeship programs and funds them for other industries, for journeymen, for carpenters, for welders. So why not childcare? Why not build our pipeline? We do not have a pipeline. We've never had a great pipeline for early childhood. Well, let's make one. And then supporting pre-service and higher ed and onboarding efforts. We're talking about fingerprint cards and TB tests and all of those things that cost people money before they can be hired, but maybe we can support them as well as reimbursing providers for those as well. And then developing a cross-agency comprehensive data system. This is super important. We have, first things first, we have licensing, we have the Department of Education, and we have DES. And every single one of them, they all have their own data systems that don't talk to each other. So if we want to know something, who do we call, and do they even have that data? We don't have a live system that can tell us how many centers are open in Arizona right now. DHS has to look that up, but unfortunately, it's not something that they're able to track on a live platform. And so we need to be able to collect these data. Where are child care deserts? What counties need infants and toddler slots? Or what first things first region needs infants and toddler slots. So we need to have a comprehensive data system that collects all of this and talks to each other. And it also will help us make really important decisions and take this information to the governor's office and to our legislature and say, hey, look at this data that we have. We can clearly tell that in Mojave County, we do not have enough of licensed providers. We do not have enough infant toddler slots. We do not have enough quality providers, but because we have all of this data, so then we can make some decisions about funding in that county. So that's really, this data systems piece is really important as well. And then supporting our home-based care, family, friend, and neighbor, or sometimes referred to as FFN. These folks are maybe taking care of their, their niece and their nephews, or maybe it's grandparents, or maybe it's a friend that, I just had a baby and, I want you to be my nanny for the next year. So but I work from home, but I just need some help. And it's all those people that are doing that work are really, really important too. And giving them the support and the professional development classes that they need and are looking for is important as well. And they don't have that right now. So that's something that we're looking into as well.
And the important thing to know is, as of May 29th, these are recommendations. The other piece that the planning group was really thoughtful and intentional about was that there also needs to be some flexibility, right, in the use of these federal funds. So as the field evolves and maybe new ideas or opportunities become available, we also thought it was really important to structure this as sort of, here's the immediate, short-term and longer-term needs that the state partnerships, the state agencies, other early childhood organizations are saying the field needs, but also there's some flexibility for movement and growth based on new data or new information as it becomes available. The other piece that, so with that in mind, one of the other pieces in terms of the immediate support that we recommended was direct bonuses, incentives, or support for early childhood educators, those working in the field. This has been one of the most challenging times for many of us, but especially for early childhood educators who were still often working on the front lines, taking good care of children and families during the pandemic, because that's what families and their communities needed was a consistent quality, early childhood educator. And so part of our recommendation was to support either direct payments, almost like an incentive check to early childhood educators, and then also think about how can we use some of those funds to recruit qualified educators into the field.
Sustainability. So this is a piece that we have to really take into consideration. These are one-time emergency investments, and there's a chart that we'll get to in a little bit that shows the longevity of be able to spend this money. But when these things, or what DES and the governor's office decide to implement, it's going to be really, really important that stakeholders and providers and teachers use their voice to say, that these are, bold, significant, and sustained funding for early childhood. We need to work in that, and we need to have the data and say, hey, this is working, and we need to continue this funding. And talking to Congress as well. We're hoping that the funding from from the feds will continue at a higher CCDF rate per year as what we've received. But our voice doing some really heavy advocacy work in the next 2 years and collecting data and being able to show great outcomes of the things that we're doing with this funding is going to be really important. What we don't want to happen is that when this money runs out, that we fall off a fiscal cliff and all of this funding goes away and then we're back where we were pre-pandemic, because that's not the idea of this funding. This idea, like Eric said, is creating a better and more vibrant early childhood system that works for everybody.
Exactly, and we need to continue to advocate for bold, significant, and sustained funding, because we know early childhood is a public good. We know that early childhood is the field on which all other fields can get to work and contribute to their communities. And the work that we do in early childhood is so important and so complex. We need to invest these monies now to build a new equitable system, and then continue to advocate for those significant and sustained funding investments beyond the pandemic.
So this is the chart. It's a little wordy and maybe a little bit confusing, but this goes through the amount or the money that we've received so far. It goes through the CARES Act. You can see the first line is CCDBG. So this CARES Act money has to be spent by September 30th of 2023, which in Arizona, we've pretty much spent all of that with this new $9 million for the Workforce and Retention Grant. Then it goes into the SRSA money, which is the Consolidated Appropriations Act in December. That also, some of that has to be spent by 2023, and then some of it has to be spent by September of 2024. I'm sorry, that's 2023, all of 2023. And then the American Rescue Plan is broken up into the CCDBG part, which is the funding, and then the Child Care Stabilization Grants. One is spent by 2024, and the other one is spent by 2023. So, we're in May of 2021. So we've got 2 to 3 years here for some really significant funding and to make big differences that we need to make in our industry. And again, collect the data, ask for advocacy from all of you to continue to use your voice, invite legislators to your center if you're comfortable with people coming in or doing a virtual visit. We did a lot of those last summer, and it's really important to get your voice out and for them to understand that this money is making a difference for your staff and for your families and for your business, and it needs to continue in some shape or form and not just stop when these dates are listed. So if we talk about early childhood funding in Arizona, we have, First Things First, which is a voter approved initiative that's a tobacco tax. I think it's like 80 cents of every package of cigarettes or chew that they put into this fund called the Early Childhood Health and Development Fund, something like that, which is really known as First Things First. So that's how they're funded. Their money, they are a state agency, but their money is voter protected. So the legislature can't come in and say, hey, we want to use $100 million of your money for XYZ. The other thing is that their funding is strictly for 0 to 5 children for health and education. Arizona's regular CCDF allocation is approximately $210 million, which is 69.2 is in mandatory matching fund, which is TANF, which is welfare, and then our DCS program, our Department of Child Safety. Those are mandatory funding from the feds, and so we have to match those, and then FTF does help with that match as well. What my point is that this top sentence, our state does not put in any general state funding at all for low income working families, and that is completely unacceptable. When we went through a recession in 2008, Jan Brewer was our governor, and she wiped that fund out. So, and many of you may remember, for a few years, we had a wait list, and it got up to, I think at one point, 12 or 13,000 children, which was not a wait list. It was a denial list. Nobody was getting in. They were not releasing anybody. And then the last 5 or 6 years, with the additional Child Care Development Block Grant that was reauthorized, we were able to suspend that wait list. And that is the only way that we're doing that right now. The only way that we're serving low income working families is because of this federal funding. If we did not have it, we would have a wait list in effect again. And one thing that is really significant, though, is the waive to the 20-hour work week waiver, that people can go to school and not have to work. So, but we can't just count on federal money to do all of the work. Our state needs to pony up and have some skin in the game. And a really great example is that the Department of Education had a preschool development block grant, and the last 2 times that they applied for this, they were denied for it again because we do not match any funding. So Representative Lorenzo Sierra has been a champion for this, and last year it got some legs, but due to COVID, it's shut down. So House Bill 2015 did get passed through the House this year, which is a really exciting day. It was one of his first bills that ever passed the House, and being a Democrat in a Republican House of Representatives here was a big deal. But again, it goes back to the discussions that we've had and getting people on board and having them understand how important this piece is for families and children. So then it went to the Senate and it just stalled, which was kind of okay, because the message from the governor's office is that we're going to try to include this funding in our budget. So just hold on. And I think that's what's happening. I think that it's a really great opportunity for us to show that we can do this. But at the same time, we cannot stop advocating for our state to, again, put some skin in the game. Let's have some money. We have $1 billion in our rainy day fund. Let's spend some of this on showing the federal government that this is important to us. And then using federal funds to support childcare subsidies, and childcare grants. And again, it goes back to matching funds for future things that we need to that we need to do. So what's coming? So you're going to be getting a new DES contract here. I know they're supposed to be in effect as of July 1st, a 5-year contract. You need to read this and understand this completely before you sign anything, and understand the trainings that it's going to be. I know there's some extra trainings that they're putting in there that it revolves around the new expulsion policy. I know that's been a hot topic, and I'm hoping that there will be some financial pieces to support that around reimbursement rates for GCS children.
That's for programs who want to contract with the Department of Economic Security to receive subsidies for, per child.
Yes. And if you're not contracted with DES and you're interested in doing that, please reach out, because I can connect you to the right people you can learn more about what that entails. Again, new funding streams are going to come out July 1st. I don't know exactly what they are. We're hoping it'll be part of the 248 million. I don't think they've decided really made any significant decisions on the larger funding streams, but I know they're working on it. We have to have continued advocacy to the governor's office. And then universal preschool. This is a really hot topic in Washington, D.C. right now, and there's legislation being written around this. I know there's a lot of nervous people when we hear universal preschool. We think of public schools, and that is not their intent. To take these children and put them in a public school. They want to meet families where they are. They want to utilize homes, they want to utilize centers, and they want to utilize public schools wherever families are and what best fits your needs. But they want them to be in high quality settings. So that's why this is so important that we ramp up either through quality first or through accreditation, because we don't have enough of those slots right now. And the other thing is that COVID really hit us hard when it comes to quality, because our focus shifted to health and safety. Not that we threw quality out the window, but many of us had a significant turnover. So now you're ramping up staff again. You're still trying to be COVID safe. You're still trying to help your families and everything, and you're probably short staffed. So those things are very important when it comes to these discussions and what can be done. I know there's a push for a minimum of $15 an hour for providers that are eligible for universal preschool. I mean, these are just things that are being thrown out there. There's nothing in legislation yet. There's no language. It's being built, but there are a lot of national partners, and myself, and I know Eric, we're on a lot of national phone calls when we're talking about this and reaching out to our people, our folks in Congress, and saying, hey, this is really important. We've always called it kind of a mixed delivery system when we talk about multiple providers, but I heard somebody the other day use the word diverse delivery system, and I really like that term, especially when we're talking about serving families and our workforce of women and children of color. But I really appreciate the using that word, a diverse delivery system. The other thing is a sliding scale for families, that you're not going to pay more than 7% of your income for tuition. So there's a lot of talk on how to do this. It's not going to happen overnight, but this is something that I think, is going to probably get legs within the next year or two. And I also think that it's going to be really, really important for you to decide to either participate into some sort of a quality program, whether it be accreditation or quality first.
And I think that what you mentioned, Barbie, was really important around increasing access to preschool for Arizona's children. What we like to think about is they're not just the children who are in Head Start. They're not just the children in the district. They're not just the children in the private care. They're not just the home-based children. These are all of Arizona's children. These are all of our children and all of our families. And it's our obligation and responsibility to ensure that they have access to the context in which they want to choose, of course, to send their child, but also that those programs are culturally, linguistically, and contextually responsive to children's early education needs, and are thinking critically about equity and making sure that the services provided are equitable services really centered around racial and social justice. So I really appreciate you, Barbie, bringing up that idea of diverse context, because we know many children in Arizona are served in family, friend, and neighbor care. The majority of children in Arizona are served in those contexts. So we have to continue to support the early education field in districts, Head Starts, private centers, nonprofit centers, but also recognize that children are also being served in other contexts as well, and all of us should be working collaboratively. So another piece that we've recommended as sort of a longer term strategy is the idea and concept of shared services, which in short is really breaking down some of the barriers that exist between organizations and building bridges where we can say, these are all of our children in the community, and so it's our responsibility. Let's say if the district program is full and doesn't have any additional slots for families, they might say, oh, let me refer you to this home-based provider who's in our local zip code, or let me refer you to the Head Start program in our community. And then also building up some of those back office services, like what if we all chipped in and shared an accountant so that we all didn't have to pay for separate accountants, which would then free up some funds for each of us to, better pay worthy wages for teachers and benefits. So
the data system that we wanted, that we talked about briefly too, is also going to help us make really great decisions on, where we need more slots in our state. I mean, 50% of Arizona is in a childcare desert. We know that, and there are, communities in our state that do not have a licensed childcare facility, or maybe even a quality childcare facility. So that data is going to allow us to make some really great decisions.
So thank you to Barbie for sharing the federal and the state context. I think what we were really hoping to provide is just information to help you really see where we're at now, and how much has progressed since before the pandemic, and how much we're really thinking about equity and innovation in terms of creating a new, much more equitable early childhood system. So I'd like to share a little bit of context around what the field looks like in terms of support for early care and education. And then I want to share some strategies to help you get involved in advocating for young children, families, and educators. One of the most important messaging we can all maintain our consistency around is that early childhood education is a public good. It's important because children and families matter, educators matter, they deserve to have quality, desirable early learning environments, because they're children and families and educators, and that's what they deserve. So that's part of our messaging. But also, if you think about early childhood as infrastructure, as a public good to communities, we know that it helps contribute to the well-being of local communities. It helps communities thrive. When there's access to quality early childhood and early care and education programs, families have a safe, secure, engaging place to drop their children off. They can get to work, they can get to school, and they can contribute to the economy. It's also important to note that the funding that Barbie mentioned is our taxpayer dollars. And if you take a look at the graphic here on the side of your screen, nearly 1 out of every $2 that we allocate at the federal level for things like the CARES Act or the Consolidated Appropriations Act or other budgeting and allocation processes, nearly 1 out of every $2 is the income tax that we pay out of our checks and when we get paid. So it's really critical to remember that these are our taxpayer dollars. They're not just monies coming out of just some random place. Like, these are monies that we pay into to enhance the vibrancy of our community. And when we it's our right, it's our responsibility to advocate for them to be directed into things like early care and education, accessible healthcare, social justice, things that help enhance the vibrancy of our communities. The other good news is that, as Barbie mentioned earlier, this is a bipartisan issue. Children and families aren't a partisan political issue. Like, they're parts of our community. Children and families are parts of our community, and we know that there's support from a variety of political affiliations for investing in early childhood education. Nearly 4 out of every 5 voters has said that the pandemic, this past 15 months or so, has revealed just how essential having access to quality childcare is for children, families, and communities. The other piece is that nearly 8 out of every 10 voters, nearly 80% of voters agree that there needs to be significant investments in early care and education, in childcare for children and families. And what's most interesting, I think, about that data is that it's across a variety of diverse demographics, ages, gender identities, political affiliations, contexts, people with children, people without children. So there's significant support for early care and education across the nation. And as you can see from some of the most recent federal investments, Congress is starting to see that their constituents, voters like you and me, are saying there needs to be investments in childcare and early care and education. So as we continue to look at the economic recovery, we have to think about childcare, early care and education as part of the infrastructure. And we know that data show that 2/3 of Americans say that we need to have access, parents need to have access to the best and most desirable childcare, early learning environments in order to continue to contribute to communities. And knowing that there's bipartisan support for early care and education, knowing that the work we do is complex and important, it's a public good. Early childhood is a public good. It's part of our infrastructure. We wanted to share a couple of ways that you can get involved and make a difference. Now, before we share these strategies, it's really important to note that no one is born knowing how to be an advocate for young children. It really does take lots of practice and support and collaboration. So the ideas that we're going to share, we encourage you to test out and try out. But of course, if you need extra support, AZAYC, the organization that I work with, and the Arizona Early Childhood Education Association, Barbie's organization, do provide technical assistance and support to help you get started and maybe answer some questions or run through some ideas. We also provide training sessions related to advocacy. So please reach out if you have any ideas or thoughts or just need some extra support. We'll share a couple strategies and a couple resources, but of course, our organizations are here to help you be successful. And we're all part of that collaborative team to advocate for children and families. The first recommendation we have for you, the first strategy, is to start to get to know your elected officials. Find out first and foremost who your state and federal elected representatives are and get to know their interests and their policy agendas. One of the most powerful statements you can say when you pick up the phone to call or when you're emailing your legislator is, "I am a voting constituent in your district." You're important, of course, as part of the community, but letting them know that you are a voting constituent, which means that you're holding them and other elected officials accountable to invest in early childhood education, is a great way to start. And then, of course, doing follow-up, we'll share some ideas of what that might look like, but making sure that they support equitable initiatives and investments in early childhood. And if they're not supporting investments in early childhood, hold them accountable when they don't. Of course, we want to try to build champions out of existing legislators. But at some point, you've got to say, if there's a legislator who's not going to support children, families, and educators, we're going to vote them out and we're going to vote in someone who will. So one of the resources I found most helpful as I built my advocacy skills as a champion for children is this website. If you go to childcareaware.org, there is a link to find your legislators. So what you do is you go to this website, click on the link, you'll put in your street address and your zip code, and it will populate and show you a photo and the contact information for every one of your elected officials, from the president to your U.S. senators and representatives, to your state representatives, and then even to your local municipality elected officials, your mayor, your commissioner, the people who serve on your county board of supervisors, anyone that you may be an elected official in your community, it'll list them out for you. So we encourage you highly to go to this website and then bookmark it. So anytime you're reaching out for federal issues, you connect with those US representatives. And if you're reaching out for those state issues, you reach out to those local and state elected officials. We wanted to share with you the US representatives who voted to support the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. That's the most recent plan that was $39 billion nationally, and then would invest around $956 million in Arizona. That plan did pass and was signed into law by the president, but we did have some of our legislators who voted to support that and some who voted not to support that. So one of the things that we would recommend doing is reaching out to your individual representative and either thanking them for their support of the American Rescue Plan and how it's going to support children, families, and educators based on what Barbie shared about the way that we hope to invest those monies. And then, of course, if you live in the district of one of the people who voted not to support the American Rescue Plan, reaching out and asking them why. Was there something that you could help explain maybe about early childhood that maybe they didn't know, or maybe inviting them to connect with you so that you can share more information about your local program and how important it is for federal investments in early care and education. You'll be able to find your district number when you go to that Child Care Aware of America website. It'll populate who your U.S. House of Representatives representative is, and that will tell you what your congressional district is. We also have two state senators, Senator Kelly and Senator Sinema, who represent the whole state. So you may consider reaching out to them and thanking them for their support. So once that bill passed the House, it went to the Senate to be negotiated and voted on, and both of our U.S. senators supported it. So if you want more information, the other resource I found helpful, especially since there's such complex language sometimes in federal bills that it's really hard. Like, no one wants to sit there and read a 100-page document about a specific law that's being passed, but there are great sort of keyword and overview descriptions on the congress.gov website, all the bills that are either in play or have been passed, and then you can actually click through and see these specific bills that were passed in this last legislative session. We've got to continue to advocate for public investments that need to continue beyond just the pandemic. We need to keep childcare top of mind for Congress. Childcare is and has become a national conversation, part of the national conversation, because the pandemic has revealed a lot of the inequities and inaccess that families had to childcare. So as we continue to get those sustained investments, we know that there's bipartisan support for early care and education. So legislators are talking about early care and education and why it's so important, and they're hearing from people like you about how that funding would impact young children and families. There are several ways to connect with your legislator. Emails, tweets, social media, those are great ways to connect digitally. But even in this virtual age, nothing replaces a person-to-person phone call, picking up your phone, dialing your legislator's office, leaving a message if you need to, or oftentimes they have a staff who directly, their responsibility is to answer phones and to take messages. So the work of legislators is to represent all of us as their voting constituents. I mean, they're humans, right? Like you and me. They believe in something about supporting the community. That's why they became a legislator, and it's our responsibility to connect with them and help them realize just how important funding early childhood is. So don't hesitate to give them a call. If you want to connect with your federal, your U.S. representatives, you can contact the U.S. Capitol switchboard at the number here, and then ask for your specific U.S. representative, and they'll connect you directly with the office. If you're interested in connecting with your local legislators, you can go to azleg.gov, and it'll list out the contact information for your local legislative district. And there's even a place where you can put in your address and search so you can find who your local elected officials are and then give them a call or an email to connect with them. Now, when you're calling or emailing or tweeting your legislative official, you've got to give an ask. You've got to share some information about you and your story, but also they want to do something to support the community. So give them something specific that they can do to make a difference for early care and education. Everything can tie back to the earliest years, children's early learning. So look at what their legislative policies are, go to their website, their official website, search what they're interested in, what their public policy supports have been, and then tie what you know about early childhood education in with those legislative priorities. So for example, my representative is particularly interested in local businesses and supporting businesses to be successful in their communities and to contribute to the economy. We know that people can't get to work if they don't have quality, safe, desirable childcare for their children so that they can go to work and do their jobs. And so part of my work was tying in just how critical early care and education is to support the workforce to get to their local businesses and be successful and thrive. Legislative representatives do often want to hear from their constituents about the issues that you face. So it's really important that you think about who you are and what you believe in as an early childhood educator. Use your power and your knowledge as sort of the impetus to be able to showcase what you know about the field, and then tie that into their public policy priority. And specifically determine and ask, like, what do you want your legislator to do for you or do for your community? Do you want them to vote a certain way on a specific bill? Maybe they could visit your early learning program, either virtually or in person. Maybe you just want them to come read a book. to your program or to the children and families in your programs. There's lots of ways to ask for specific support, but be very clear about what you're wanting when you're talking with your legislator. You're knowledgeable. The experience that you have in the early care and education field is one of your strengths, is the strength of early childhood educators, and you can capitalize on that to be able to really show yourself as an expert, someone that the legislators can go to when they have questions about childcare or early care and education. And it's really what makes, I think, our voices powerful, is that we know so deeply about child development, about the importance of early care and education, and we have the power to be able to help other people understand that as well. So here's an example. Let's say you pick up the phone and you're calling your elected officials, maybe your local or state representative, maybe your US representative. One of the first things we encourage you to say is, "My name is, and I am a voting constituent in your district." Some other sort of general talking points you might throw in could be, Americans care about young children. Arizonans care about young children. We want to see investments to give them a strong start. And I'm asking you to invest in early care and education to create a more vibrant, equitable community for all of us. I hope I can count on your vote to support childcare, to support this specific bill. Thank you for listening. I'll follow up soon and hope to see your support and investment for Arizona's children and families. If you go to the website here at the bottom of the screen, there's some additional resources on what you could say if you're calling your legislator. The most important thing is to say your name, say you're a voting constituent, share a little bit about what the story is. Maybe you're facing a shortage of early childhood educators to take good care of children in your program. Whatever the need is, talk about your experience and then give your ask. I hope that you'll vote to support this bill, or I hope that you'll vote to invest in early care and education. As we mentioned, social media is one really important way to stay connected. I have found in my experience that phone calls and emails are probably the most effective way, phone calls especially, are the most effective ways to connect with both US and state representatives. What I've found helpful is using social media to stay up to date on their policy issues. So if they're supporting a specific bill, or if they're supporting a specific policy, I follow my representative, I follow all the representatives on Facebook and Twitter to be able to understand kind of where they're at and what their thinking is. So we put together all of the Twitter handles for our US representatives, current US representatives, here on the page. So please, once you know your district and your representative, definitely follow your specific representative, but I encourage you to follow all the representatives. The other piece that we know is that we just can't go back to the early care and education field we had before the pandemic. It was not equitable. It was oppressive, and it specifically ensured that certain children, and it was built on a system that ensured that certain children and families were able to access quality, desirable early care and education, and certain families weren't able to access quality and desirable early care and education because it was built on a white supremacist and racist system. So part of our work, and part of the work we would recommend for you to be doing as you're thinking about your own advocacy work, is to continue to reflect and build your own skills in terms of equity, racial, and social justice. We have to recognize this is a non-negotiable, it's a fact. Racism and white supremacy exists, and it continues to oppress Black, Brown, and Indigenous children, families, and educators, and others who have been minoritized. That's not fair, and that's not just. And if we think about our NAIC Code of Ethical Conduct and the NAIC Advancing Equity Statement, part of our ethical obligation and moral obligation to children and families is to do no harm to them. And the system that we had, well, the early childhood system we had, but also the bigger systems that we live within, have minoritized and oppressed children and families of color for a very long time. It does harm to them, and we need to stop that. So part of our commitment is to build a new system that's much more equitable and that's focused on racial and social justice for young children and families. So one of the first ways you can get involved with that work is to read the NAIC Advancing Equity Statement, naeic.org/equity. What I love about that statement is that it's very clear about what we used to have in the early childhood field and what could be possible if we thought about equity. And then it gives specific examples of what you can do as an educator, what lawmakers can do, what community members can do to start to break down some of those inequitable systems and begin to build new, more equitable early care and education systems. We've got to commit to anti-racist and anti-bias practices. If you're interested in doing that work, you can check out the anti-bias education book at the naiyc.org store. And then we have to continue to actively work to reflect, speak up, and speak out about injustices, especially as they do harm to young children who are Black, Brown, and Indigenous. And you can find out more at naic.org/equity. Your voice and your vote matters, and it's important and it counts. It's really important that you vote and make a voting plan. If you want some more information, you can visit azeyc.org/voting. What we've done for you is we compiled some important dates, tips to get to know your candidates, ideas of what you could say or ask candidates who are running for elected offices in your community, and then your rights as a voter. So azeyc.org/voting, check it out. And to kind of summarize, your voice and your vote is important. You are an early childhood educator and you have the knowledge and the power to understand just how critical the work we do is, and you have the power to make other people understand that as well. Just like working in an early learning environment with young children and families and coworkers, relationships are at the heart of building strong connections with your legislators. So continue to think about and build and sustain those relationships. When you stay connected through email or through phone, it helps your representatives get to know who you are and the work that you do in early childhood, but it also starts to develop their understanding of the importance of early care and education. That's why they count on you and me to tell them about what's important to us, what our challenges are, and what we need to advance our field. But definitely be timely and follow up if you don't get an email or a phone call back. Representatives are pretty busy during the legislative sessions, but you still should reach out to them. And then, of course, if you successfully met or called one of your legislators, sending a thank you email, kind of recapping, here's what we talked about, here's what I'd like you to do, helps keep that communication line open. So those are some ideas for getting involved in early childhood advocacy. We do encourage you, if you are interested, to check out some of our upcoming, stay connected with us to check out some of our upcoming advocacy trainings and sessions. I also encourage you to go to azeyc.org/advocacy-policy. And what we've done in that website is we've put together a list of almost any resource you could think about as you're building your early childhood advocacy skills, from the Child Care Aware website link to talking points that you could use when you're talking with legislators, to updated funding sources and information. The other thing we recommend is we can't do this alone, and we're not alone. We do this work in collaboration with our communities and our colleagues. We encourage you to and invite you to become part of the professional movement. By being a member of AZYC and NAYC, you are part of a larger movement to advance equity in the early care and education field and to elevate early childhood educators as professionals. For as little as $30 a year, you can access digital membership or other benefits like magazines, publications, discounts, resources, even access to discounted healthcare and other savings through your NAYC, AZYC membership. If you're interested, check out azeyc.org/join, and you can learn more about what we do and how you can get involved and be part of this larger collaborative community.
If you are a licensed child care center owner, director interested in membership to our organization, we have about 350 members statewide from all corners of the state. We represent large corporations, we represent mom and pops, nonprofit, faith-based, a little bit of everybody. So we are larger and stronger with your voice and the advocacy work that we do, and you're first to know about things that we're involved with, and action alerts, emails, newsletters, all of those good things. So membership is $350 a year. We do ask for an assessment if you're willing to. That helps with our advocacy work and lobbying. So, and that is the part of that is tax deductible as well. So if you're interested, reach out to me, or you can go onto our website, azece.org, and go to the membership tab, and the application is there.
Thank you, Barbie. And what I love about the Arizona Early Childhood Education Association and Barbie's work is that, especially during the pandemic, they've stayed extremely connected and closely in communication with the Department of Economic Security around what early care and education providers need and how we can use those federal funding sources to really make life better for children, for families, and for educators. And so Early Childhood Education Association is definitely an advocate for childcare providers. And Barbie, we really appreciate your ability to make sure that the needs and the voices of early care and education providers are heard in our policy development.
Thanks.
So some ideas for kind of next steps. We do want to sort of give some closure for this particular session, but please know it's not the end of our connection together. I'm sure we'll see each other at future advocacy events. We hope that you've seen through this presentation that this is a historic time for early care and education. Arizona's received $1.3 billion of emergency support for childcare and for early care and education. That's more than we've ever received in any one-time support from the federal Congress. So it's a historic and a very exciting time. Those federal investments have been made, and that the next steps are to start to use those funds in an equitable way, making sure that they're invested equitably in communities that need them most. Those are federal investments. What we hope you've taken out of today's session is that we still need to continue those federal investments, but we also need to secure state investments in early care and education. And we can do that by leveraging all of our voices through the strategies for advocacy that we mentioned earlier in this presentation. So the work doesn't stop after this session. We really encourage you to continue to be a champion for children, make your voice heard, and get out there and connect with your elected officials and let them know just how important your work is in early care and education, and get those bold, significant, sustained investments because it's what's best for Arizona's children, families, and educators.
And your stories matter. Our parents and early childhood educators, directors, owners, your stories matter. So we will probably be reaching out to you a lot in the next 2 to 3 years and getting your stories and how this funding has helped you do wonderful and great things for our industry.
So before we close, I just want to share a few resources that you can kind of bookmark and use as you continue to develop your advocacy skills. The America for Early Ed website has information around how to register to vote, how to get involved at the federal level, and then you can sign up for electronic communication to share some upcoming opportunities to call your legislators, some bills that are on the horizon, those kinds of things. So if you go to americaforearlyed.org, you can sign up and get some additional information on sort of the federal landscape. As I mentioned, azyc.org/advocacy-policy has some great resources related to state engagement, how you can make your voice heard at the state level, and then also some federal resources as well. Child Care Aware of America, that's that website that you can go in and search your legislative representatives and elected officials from the national level all the way down to your local level. Childcarerelief.org has some great advocacy videos, templates, and other tools to help you develop your voice as an early care and education provider. The First 5 Years Fund, those are the graphics we use that told us about how voters are thinking about early care and education and how people want investments for young children and families. They have some great up-to-date data on what voters are saying about early care and education and sort of where bills are in the process at the US federal level. So you can sign up for their newsletter. And of course, NAYC.org, some great early childhood professional membership resources. So we want to thank you for joining us for this session. We'll hope to see you at a future early childhood advocacy session. Stay connected with us through our websites, through social media to hear up-to-date information and to stay activated and involved. But please know you are an early childhood champion, and we look forward to seeing the difference you can make as you continue to advocate for children, families, and educators.
Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to working with you soon.
All right, bye everyone. Take good care.
Audio Jungle.